I want to talk about the full moon coming up on Friday morning. And I'm popping on a little earlier than I usually do because I was looking at the chart last night and then I jumped into the bathtub and I practiced this really simple technique that I learned from Jonathan Goldman on Paul Chek's podcast. Jonathan Goldman is a sound healer, and he talked about how we can do so much healing with humming and how we can get into this like really present state. And so I've been practicing that when I take baths. Like, it feels really extra good in the bathtub. So I did my humming, and then I hear, "It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor?" And I was like, oh boy, Mr. Rogers is here. And I knew he had messages for us. So I got really excited about that. And I got out of the tub and looked up his astrology chart. And it's so interesting because this full moon is conjunct his natal Chiron. And the full moon is also coming up on Chiron and the North Node. So there's a lot of opportunity for healing ourselves and really like shining a light on what our authentic self is. And one of Mr. Rogers' most famous quotes, or there's a lot of them, he would say a lot of the same simple things every episode, and one of them is, "I like you just the way you are." And it's so simple and so powerful. I was just thinking, what if we said that to ourselves and to other people, when we feel that way? And so I had to go watch this documentary about him because I haven't watched Mr. Rogers since I was a kid. I remember really liking him. I remember him coming in and taking his jacket off and putting on the cardigan and buttoning the cardigan or zipping it. And then he would go and he'd sit down and he'd put on his tennis shoes and tie each shoe. And there was a huge teaching just right there of being present, being present in every little thing that we do. And I watched this documentary and it was just fascinating. I didn't realize what a spiritual person he was. And it makes sense too, learning that. But when I say spiritual, what's amazing is it wasn't in this incredibly outward way. Like, I feel like he was the epitome of divine masculine energy, because his message to kids was, it's okay to feel scared. It's okay to feel sad. He really was about teaching children that their emotions are okay and they should be honored. And he really held this really safe space for kids and adults too. So there's all these people in the documentary that actually were his neighbors. And they all talk about what a wonderful person he was, and how one guy even said he was almost supernatural, like how amazing he was. But he didn't acknowledge that at all. He was so humble. He was just, and you think about how long his show went on, he was so devoted. So I thought it was so amazing. And another message that came through with this, what was amazing about hearing from his actual neighbors, is that he walked his talk. He didn't just say these things on his show. He did them, like he lived them. He lived he showed the way, and he was the change, you know? So it's fascinating to me that so many of us probably watched him and have this, I don't know, you know, I'm wondering, like, how did he affect me as a child? Because I don't remember a ton, but I'm sure he was such a safe haven for children who didn't have parents that honored their feelings and things like that. I feel like when I was watching him, I might have been too young to understand, or I just don't remember. But what I'll say is, I put on an episode of his show after the documentary, because the documentary wasn't that long, and I really enjoyed watching it as an adult. Like, it just made me feel so calm and grounded and in touch with myself. And I feel like he's coming through this full moon to remind us of that I am presence that Aries represents, and our inner child. And to remind us that our inner child never goes away. Even though we need to grow up, we can still honor ourselves and our inner child and our feelings. And one of the quotes they showed in the movie was, he said, "When I was a boy, I would see scary things on the news. My mother would say, 'Look for the helpers.'" And I just thought that was so beautiful, because the world is just picking up this pace. It's just going faster and faster and faster, it feels like. And there's so much, so many distractions. And there's so much that we might feel inspired to do too, right? But I've just really been feeling like I hit a tipping point with that. And I am like, I need to slow down. And that's exactly what Mr. Rogers does. I even wonder if kids watched him today, would they be able to pay attention? You know, like, I think our attention spans are even different at this point. If any of you have kids and you've watched Mr. Rogers with them, I'd love to know if they enjoyed it, you know? And I would suggest giving it a whirl, seeing how that goes and watching it with them, because it's just, there's some deep wisdom in the very, very simple messages on that show. For example, there's one where Santa Claus comes to visit, and this little puppet is like, "Oh, I'm afraid to meet Santa Claus because what if I did something bad?" And then Santa Claus ends up meeting him, and he says, "Well, I was afraid to meet you because I've done some bad things." And Santa Claus says, "Well, I've done some bad things too. We all do bad things." And then Santa Claus moves on, and somebody else sees him and says, "You look like the chef down the street," or whatever. And he's like, "Well, Santa Claus can look like a lot of people." And it was just this whole metaphor for God. And I mean, so deep and profound, but put in the simplest way, showing us that we all hold this spark of light within us. And when Mr. Rogers was a child, he was overweight and he was bullied. They called him Fat Freddy. And it just really hurt his feelings, of course, you know, and it really impacted him. And from that point on, he made the point to himself to see people as their essential selves and not to just judge them on the surface level and treat them like crap like that, you know? So if you watch that documentary about Mr. Rogers, it will just, it makes you feel so good. It's just like the most amazing spiritual lesson. And the other thing that's so interesting is in his chart. I mean, if you look at his astrology chart, if you're into astrology, he has some really amazing placements, and he has the same kite formation in his chart that's in the sky right now. Like, not the same constellation with the same signs, but the same aspects, the same shape of the aspects. And it's a really, some people say this is like a sign of like destiny or fate. And the last time I was observing this kite in the sky, we've still got Neptune at the top and Uranus and Pluto involved. And then at the bottom, there was the sun. And at the bottom now we have Mercury. And so he's also trining Jupiter. So there's a lot of connection to the higher worlds and connection to these advanced souls and spirits who can bring back wisdom for us. And I wanted to share the Sabian symbols as well. So for the moon, it's crazy too. I forgot to mention this. The moon is at 6 degrees exactly, and Mr. Rogers' Chiron was 6 degrees exactly. Like when I say they're conjunct, they are conjunct. So, and Chiron is the wounded healer. His wound was being hurt by those kids, by those bullies, and then he wanted to go forward and help other people feel like they fit in, like we're all connected. And so, and you know, I think of that quote in the Bible that is love thyself as thy neighbor, or is it love thy neighbor as thyself? Interesting, I said it that way because I think it goes both ways. I think that's the lesson here, is that when we can really love ourselves, we can reflect that to other people. And so the Sabian symbol for the moon is a square brightly lighted on one side. Motivated by desire, we develop a particular drive or focus. And so this is like really showing us who we are and what we really desire in life, what our inspirations are. And then the sun, which is always opposite the moon on a full moon. And I would say the sun is informing the moon because the moon reflects the sun's light. The sun is at 6 degrees Libra, the ideals of a man abundantly crystallized, the power of visualization for better or for worse. So when I read these symbols, I couldn't help but when I see a square brightly lighted on one side, I actually didn't think of this immediately. I thought of it this morning. When I woke up and I walked into the kitchen, my landline phone was like slightly off kilter and the screen was lit up and it was like a bright square. And I thought to myself, I should call my neighbor. Like I still had this Mr. Rogers kind of influence, right? So there was that. There was like this connection piece. But then also, I think of the phones we're looking at all the time, right? And when you look at the sun, the power of visualization for better or for worse, this is really about cleaning up our thoughts. We've got Mercury in Virgo. Because in the age of Aquarius, this is like what we're stepping into. It's about how our thoughts and our feelings create our reality. And it's all about frequency. We're beginning to understand the word and how the word works. So if we can do this work of self-acceptance and self-love, it can really help us to clean up our thoughts, clean up that self-talk that is putting us down. Because would you want to do that to other people? The other thing I've been noticing, so with that, I was thinking with the square brightly lighted on one side, what are we taking in from the television, from the phone? I know I don't really need to talk a lot about this to the people who are watching this, but that's what I was thinking of when I see this juxtaposition. Like, what is your feed? What are you feeding your soul? What are you feeding your mind? And then how is that going to be reflected back out? With this Libra Aries axis, it's so much about the mirror and the reflection. And there we go again. We're looking into this black mirror that has the light. But so there was that, and I lost track a little bit. One thing I've noticed since the sun moved into Libra that's so interesting is I've become so curious about other people and wanting to understand them. And I've really been diving into I don't know what else to call them. If somebody out there has a good term for what astrology, human design, gene keys, Enneagram, any of those kind of tools, I call them self-knowledge modalities. That feels really clunky. If you have an idea of what these modalities, a good term for these, let me know. But I've become interested in understanding my own again more. It's like every time we look at these things, there's a new layer. And I was having all these epiphanies the other day with my gene keys. But I've been curious about other people's too, so that I can understand what their blueprint is. Because a lot of times the way people are is how they're made to be. Yes, we have a lot of conditioning, and we're all doing our best to try to get underneath that and get back to our truest selves. But we all are so different. And I hear Mr. Rogers again right now. He's like, we're all so different, and that's what's so beautiful, And if we can really embrace that, it feels like it works both ways. We can accept ourselves more as we accept others. It's this whole infinity symbol. So something that I have been working through and that I rediscovered in my gene keys is that I have a very childlike nature. And there is this philosopher wizard inside of me that says, oh, that's just rubbish. Like there's this really deep part of me that wants to like shut down the child or hide it or thinks like, we'll say like, oh, you're so immature or something like that. But I think what Mr. Rogers is really, what he really shows, and he said, my viewers are just as bright as me. They're just, I can't remember the exact quote. They're just shorter. He said they're just shorter and younger, something like that. So there's like this potential with a childlike nature to keep this wonder for life and to simplify the deepest things, to just really still be connected to that other side of the veil and ask really great questions. Like, why would those people treat those other people differently? Just like really simple things. And so my gene keys say I'm supposed to go through life experiencing it like a child. So I really just have to accept that about myself, that my little girl is really important. And I feel like all of our little children, even if that's not a part of your blueprint, all of our little children inside of us need to be heard, and they need their feelings honored. And these messages are just so freaking beautiful. I feel this healing energy of Mr. Rogers as Chiron, as the wounded healer, and the North Node, which is our collective destiny. And this is what we're doing. We're all doing our best just to heal and to figure things out. And the other thing coming through about this, coming back to that Sabian symbol of the sun, the ideals of a man abundantly crystallized. The more we do this work of excavating our truest self, the more sort of power we come into. And power is neutral. It can be used either in good ways or bad ways. So the power of visualization, for better or for worse, we really can't underestimate our power, and especially like the power of an innocent child and the children that are coming in right now that are just like, I feel like so many advanced souls. But we really need to understand that it's important to walk our talk, and I'm saying this for myself, I'm not trying to preach, but these are the messages I'm taking away. It's important to walk our talk. I think that it's easier to do that if we can simplify. And it's important for us to keep our mind and our heart connected. Mr. Rogers had this huge Leo energy, spiritual Leo energy. He had Jupiter and Neptune conjunct in Leo. And it's just like, that's where he lived, was in this heart of the child. And if we can think from that perspective and simplify and come back to basics, I think it's more likely that what we're creating in our lives is going to be, I'm hearing pure gold. That's the gold. It's like the sun card in the tarot, right? And it's funny, I have cards out here. I guess I'll just pull a few. I was going to pull some as I talked, and I just got in the flow and that didn't happen. But ooh, oh my gosh, you guys, look what just fell out. Purity. It's so perfect. Many messages in this card. Coming back to purity, look at the different color of the eyes. There's different perspectives. And the wolf goes by instinct. This has been coming up a lot for me. Coming back to our instincts of how do we feel? How does that make you feel? That's important. And there's this higher perspective here as well. It feels very spiritual how big his face is in the sky, and he's overlooking these trees. And the other thing with the wolves have packs, there can also be the lone wolf. But I think that it's important for us to have community and to connect with people on that level, the ones that we really can resonate with, and reach that sort of pure enjoyment of life, It's important to connect with those types of people. And then I wanted to pull a feather card, see what other... a white feather. White eagle. The connection to divine guidance is within you. And that was his message, is that we all have it within us. Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. I feel like Fred Rogers was an earth angel. I get total angelic frequencies from these cards. And perhaps he's an angel right now, speaking with me. I wanted to pull an animal card because that feels so appropriate for, if you're thinking about children's shows. Let's see what animal wants to come through. The cosmic egg. Oh, wow. Now that is getting deeper. Which was it first, the chicken or the egg? It doesn't matter. It's the mystery. And we don't have to figure out the mystery. We can really just be present in it and follow our heart, follow our inspiration, and be open to feel, and to let other people know that that's okay, and to see other people as having this divine spark within them as well. Whew! Mr. Rogers getting me verklempt. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so those are the full moon messages that wanted to come through. I hope you guys have a beautiful full moon. Take care of yourselves. Do something fun. Have a good cry. Have a good anger fit. Whatever it is, honor your inner child and your most authentic self, and you'll be doing all right. I like you just the way you are. All right. Love you guys.